structured presentation plan, just so you know, because this topic is like huge, and so we'll kind of do a lot of question and answer type stuff. So my name is Allan. I am the owner of, I wear multiple hats. I own Main Street Farms, so we're a certified organic vegetable farm in Portland. I've been doing that for about 9 years, and 2 years ago we got into growing hemp for CBD. Last year we grew 15 acres of all feminized crop, and this year we did about 40 acres of all feminized crop. We also built our own processing facility in Portland that runs under the name of New York Hemp Oil. We have a retail brand called Head and Heel, which is sold all over New York State. And then I am also the president of the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. So for the past year we've been dealing with ag markets and just lobbying the state to make sure none of us fail our THC compliance tests and all those fun things. And yeah, Kaelan.
So my name's Kaelan. Saw many of y'all this morning. I'm about to reintroduce myself to those who weren't here. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Castetter Sustainability Group, known as CSG Hemp. We do a lot of things. This year we grew with 15 partner farms across the state of New York, 250,000 plants. We also have a dedicated breeding program and feminized seed production program specifically for New York and Northeast climates. I specialize in our regulatory analysis and compliance services, and then we also are working on a manufacturing facility that will help brands build and succeed and be competitive in the marketplace. So that's what we do. We have a great team, and I've been in the industry since 1996.
Kaelan's also on the board of the Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. So how many people here grow vegetables? All right, how many people here actually grew hemp? Oh, sweet, so we got a lot of us. So this is why we didn't want to make the presentation. We didn't know if we were going like straight beginner or if we were getting into more advanced topics and getting deep into these. So how many people grew, let's see, are we like 1 to 5 acres? If you did 1 to 5 acres, where are we at? Okay. How many people are above 10 acres? All right, so we're all over the place. So we've got a lot of experienced growers in here. I don't know, what do we want to start with? You know, the title of our presentation was the whole thing, right? Growing, harvesting, drying. I'm assuming a lot of people are using feminized genetics, growing their own transplants or buying plugs in. I'm also assuming that a lot of people are using transplanters to plant their plugs, probably some on black plastic, some without. We've done all those things. On the genetic side, are you guys growing your own seeds or are you using clones? What are we? Seeds? Okay.
Is anyone going for industrial type?
It's awesome.
Fiber?
Industrial, yeah, fiber, grain. Okay, excellent. All right, well, I personally don't have any experience with that, and I don't think Allan does too. So this is all on the high cannabinoid, female-only side of it. So unfortunately, don't have much expertise on that to help you all. But
yeah.
Dr. Gilbert Jenkins here. So.
Awesome. Yeah. So mostly, I'll just start from our experience on the starting of the growing side. We've done clones and we've done feminized genetics. All of our feminized genetics have always performed better. We have our own greenhouses because we've been a vegetable farm, so we do our own plant starts, but I do know there's a lot of people selling plant starts. If you're going to go that route to buy plant starts, make sure you're buying feminized genetics from a very reputable greenhouse operation that tells you what the genetics are, not just shows you a COA that is a year old from the seed they grew last year.
Maybe we should talk about best practices for germinating, getting
yeah, I mean, do you guys want to start with the seed part, or is there something else you guys want to get into? Should we just start from the seeds? Yeah? All right.
Okay, so if you're buying seed, right, and you're going to germinate it yourself, there's a lot of factors to think about, and even top professional greenhouse operations. This year we subbed out some of our plug production to a very large professional greenhouse, and we're very unhappy with the results. So there's a learning curve for everyone. And so there's a few things that are important. Obviously your germination rate. but also timing and making sure that your plugs are ready to go when you're ready to plant, not sooner or not too much later, right? And then also that the plants have the best ability to succeed once you put it in the harsh growing environment of the soil, right? So, Tanzi, we can talk about field prep.
Yeah.
That's the first part of it.
Back to the genetics. If you plant late enough in like May, you don't need to grow lights in your greenhouse. I don't know if anyone's putting up lights, but if you're using good genetics, you should be fine with that. We've done everything from 48 cells up to 200s. 98s, 128s are totally fine, but we've noticed that you do want to get those plants out into the field within 4-6 weeks after planting. They do get root bound. What we've noticed is that once that happens, the longer they're in those cells, and once they go out, for the vegetable growers, you know, we're used to like throwing lettuce and tomatoes in the ground on a transplanter, and they're fine. You're just like, who cares? You know, the tomatoes are growing in the tire tracks at a certain point. And so what we've noticed with all the varieties of hemp we've grown for the past 2 years is they have a serious transplant shock. We're certified organic, we use fish emulsion in our transplanters. And even with that, we're still noticing probably a 2-week period from that transplant really actually rooting and doing anything. After that 2-week period, you know, then we're looking at the plant kind of doubling in size about every 7 to 10 days. So then they go fast. But those first 2 weeks are kind of crucial, especially if you have high weed pressure. We've noticed in the fields that are really weedy, the plants are hard to cultivate because the roots are sensitive when they're that small. And so if you've got a lot of weed pressure in that field, you got to be careful, and you might have to hand weed a little bit. But the hemp does not outcompete the weeds in that first couple weeks. We've learned that lesson the hard way. So be careful of that once you're doing your transplants. Clones we've even had worse luck with. So.
And for germinating, when you're germinating in your greenhouse, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. One thing that a lot of first-time growers that we've seen had problems with is overwatering, right? You do not want to drown them, right? Because they're just not going to grow as much. And so one way to do it, the way we do it is we actually water it. So if you have the tray and the cells, the insert in the tray, pick the insert up, pour the water into the tray, in the bottom of the tray, and then pick up the tray so that the water is on the bottom. Instead of trying to irrigate it from the top, we found that when you irrigate it from the top, there's a lot of issues, and then sometimes the leaf, the canopy, kind of keeps the water off.
What sort of growing media are you using in your trays?
So
Potting soil.
Yeah.
Non-nutritive?
So we use the McEnroe, regular McEnroe stuff. We've had McEnroe make us custom mixes. We've had Green Tree make us custom mixes, higher nitrogen. But to be honest, if you time it right and your fields are dry enough and your soil is warm enough that first week of June, you really don't need a higher feed in a 98 cell tray or even a 72, because too much nitrogen and the plants get super leggy. And we've planted out plants that were like this tall before.
In a 98? In a 98 cell tray?
In like 72s. Yeah, they've gotten like this big. It's crazy. Up to my knees sometimes. In trays, and then, no, we're still planting with our water wheel.
Really?
That works on the water wheel, not the mechanical transplanter. But you don't want them to get leggy, because at first we were like, oh, the plants that were leggy grew massive. They were like 6 foot tall Christmas trees, but you don't really want all that vegetative growth. It's like the same with tomatoes. Yeah, you can pump them with nitrogen. You get these huge tomato plants with not enough flowering sites. So the McEnroe, the regular McEnroe mix that they make is perfectly fine for a 4 to 6 week in a 98 cell tray, as long as you're not overwatering and washing all your nutrients out. That's the biggest thing, is the overwatering piece. If you're not going to be able to get them out within 6 weeks, if you have fields that don't dry out fast in that first week of June, you want to go to a bigger plug. Because what happens is the plants are fine, the roots are fine, but they get too leggy. And so if you're going to be in there for like 8 weeks or something because your soil just doesn't dry out normally, or you think it's going to be a wet spring, I would go into a bigger, like a 50 cell or something like that, just to be safe.
You also don't want the plants to be too high when you put them in the rotary transplanters, because they're gonna chop the tops off as they plant. And also the soil prep, the tillage is really important. you really need a good 8 inches of loose tillage. The plants, as they start to establish, as the roots will establish, if they hit hard pan, they will start to grow, the roots will grow this way, and then if you have you know, a hard windstorm before they're really big and established, they can start to push over. Even late in the season too, you can see that problem. So you really want to give the roots the ability to grow, you know, deep into the soil, because they will grow, you know, horizontally instead, and that's where you really want to avoid that. So
Yeah.
We had a lot of luck. We transplanted after we got our first true leaf that early.
Mm-hmm.
We had 0 transplant shock. We did have 1 die-off, and it started growing right away. Perfect.
Yeah, you can. We've done that too in 128s, and you can absolutely plant that early. The only, you know, you got to make sure timing-wise, you're perfect in terms of seeding and getting out into your fields, and knowing that your fields are prepped and ready to go. Because once they start getting root bound, and then they get super leggy, and that's when you get a lot of transplant shock. But yeah, what we did this year is we started seeds basically every 2 weeks, and then we just planted every 2 weeks, and we just had them staggered all the way up until the end of June, and it worked out great. So it's just
depending on the genetics.
Depending on the genetics, but yeah, it's all going to be about the timing on that. But yeah, the 128s, planting them out really small, as long as if you're doing it or your crew is doing it, pulling those plugs can be a pain. That's the hard part, is pulling them out when they're that little and not having the whole root ball fall.
Lots of care.
Lots of care has to go in when you're doing it that way, but they do take off pretty well. But again, you have to have also low weed pressure for that small plant. Yes?
When that field prep again, I planted in plastic mulch, but I'm thinking I'm also biodynamic. So this year I'm planning to plant right into a cover crop or choose another. We're trying to figure out which way to manage the weed pressure from the very beginning.
So,
It's really tough. It's all about timing.
Yeah, so we grow both ways, black plastic and also bare ground, non-irrigated bare ground. We haven't planted into cover crop yet, but there are people interseeding cover crop in between the rows. So when you're talking about the feminized genetics that are not autoflower is a whole different game. We're just going to talk about like the photoperiod sensitive bigger plants. When you're doing those, we were generally planting about 1,800 per acre, 5 foot on center, 5 foot. We have 5 foot tire spacing. So you've got a 5 by 5 grid. There is room to plant cover crops in there at some point in the season if you want to do that. What we've noticed with our black plastic versus the bare ground is the black plastic is nice if you have the right tools to cultivate the plastic edges. For any vegetable growers, you know the pains of that. And so the hard part when you're doing vegetables on black plastic and you have a cultivating tractor, you can actually drive over the plants when you're doing, let's say, lettuce or whatever. These plants get so big so fast. The cultivating tractors, you get like 2 passes to get those edges, and then that's it. You're done for the season. So then you've got to have a whole nother in-row or between-row cultivation method. The bare ground is nice because if you have, we have cultivating tractors that go over the plants, and when they get too big, we kind of custom made a smaller cultivator to go in between the rows on a much smaller, like 20 horsepower tractor. And so that's kind of how we address those issues. And now that we've figured that out, we could probably interseed a cover crop in between the rows and then mow that down every few weeks or whatever in the season. So we're still working on those kinds of methods. And there's also like nitrogen competition. It could bring up a whole host of issues. So before we scale that part up, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
And we had good luck with red clover as a cover crop. It grew real thick and quickly. Some other types of clover we didn't have as much success with, but we also had a couple farms that grew into the plastic, and they used more of a manual weeding, like with weed whackers and a mower, and the plastic was a nightmare for that. Right? It didn't really help. They should half their field have plastic, half not, and half the plastic was a lot more of an issue. And then obviously, every time you clip that plastic and you get the plastic pieces, and those will just never go away. And then also the wind too. This farm specifically was on a slope, and they weren't really able to tuck the plastic in well enough, and it just big to turn into a sale.
Yeah, it's tough. If you're not an experienced plastic vegetable grower, I probably wouldn't recommend starting as a plastic hemp grower. I would say just go straight bare ground, and you'll probably have an easier time. And if you're growing like an acre or under, I mean, we know people who are just covering their whole acre in landscape fabric and just burning holes through and just doing it that way. I mean, you'll never have to worry about weeds for the whole year. So that's a whole nother method that for the smaller acre or under, I would seriously consider investing in. And you get a lot of benefits with the landscape fabric, like the warming of the soil and all of those kinds of things, and it's reusable for like a decade. So it's not a one-year expense.
Another practice we did was once we put the seedlings in the ground, we put straw, certified organic straw around, and that reflects the sun, keeps the moisture in the ground.
Right.
Very effective.
And that all comes down to the scale also, whether how many plants you have to take care of. Now, if you're growing autoflower genetics, I know there's someone here from the King Seeds who sells the autoflowers. Those are like 10,000 plants per acre. Those you could direct seed. If you do it right and you have good timing, the canopy of those could kind of crowd out any weeds that you have underneath. So it's all going to be kind of just what your systems, what equipment you have, and what you want to, what you want to do when you harvest. So that's kind of the seeds, the planting, the spacing.
So on this, you can kind of see. So this is a good lesson. So we contracted the plug production on these outright. So if you see on the previous picture. These are ours, right? And then this was what we contracted out, paid a lot of money for. So you can see they're way too tall, and they also you start to see some nutrient, some deficiencies. And then once they went into the ground, they started to bleach. Now, they didn't give the plants the beneficials that they were supposed to before they went in, and they also overfed them. And so what happened was, what we believe happened, and so these were grown not in soil, but actually on like ponds, right? And so what happened was, we think the nutrients didn't get to the middle of those ponds, and the plants at first were not growing as quickly as they wanted it to. So then they overfed it with nitrogen, and they just shot right up. And it created a lot of problems. Some of these rows ended up they just basically, we call palm tree, right? So they basically just stayed like this tall and didn't really grow. So it's a big problem. You don't want to overfeed in the transplant phase. If you prep your soil right and you have a good source of nutrients in your soil, you should really just like we just go into a pro mix, I believe, on our stuff. So be careful about hot soil and be careful about overfeeding if you're growing them, with like a hydroponics environment too. So there's a great example. And then, we had to play catch up the entire year on these plants, and that's a sizable amount of investment too. I think we had 150,000 plants done by this specific operation. So,
looks like you paid him already.
Huh?
The guy in the hat, he's smiling.
Yeah. Well, these guys are the growers. So they're not the ones they're not the greenhouse that we contracted out.
I've heard some. You get those in state?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of greenhouses popping up selling transplants in state right now for hemp. And some of them have experience with bedding plants, some of them might have been certified organic, and some of them are just popping up because they see a market opportunity. You gotta be, those look good. You gotta be really careful of who you're buying the transplants from. If you have your own infrastructure, I highly recommend starting your own seeds if you can. If you can't do it, just be choosy, and anyone that's gonna sell you transplants, ask for like 2 or 3 references of farmers from last year. Call those farmers and ask them how the transplants did. And if they won't give you references, or if you call the references and they're not good, I would find another place, because you have a lot of options right now in transplants. There's not just 1 or 2 places in the state of New York. There's a lot of people getting into this industry, so be careful, do your due diligence. If it's their first year and they have no track record, they've never even grown hemp themselves, I would be a little bit
very, very skeptical.
Yeah.
And then also, if you are going to grow your own, if you have a greenhouse, but a lot of people throw up a hoop house and first year try and do it, there's a large danger of that in New York, and that's cold, right? if it gets too cold, your plants are gonna die. If it gets below like 45 degrees at nighttime, you're risk to have your plants die. And then we also noticed, well, so we had 3 or 4 of our growers, you know, basically germinate on their own, and their germination rates were between 75 and 85%. Our germination rate was about 96%. The people we contracted out was 93%. So you know, when you grow on your own and it's your first time, you know, there's definitely, you're gonna see some loss. Any good seed company should give you overpack. They should definitely give you overage when they sell you seed, right? If you're paying 50 cents, $1, $1.50, whatever per seed, you should get, you know, in our opinion, you should always get at least 10% overpack. Not all seed companies will honor that. If they don't, that's another red flag. But controlling the temperature in the greenhouse is critical. There's a lot that we don't know about cannabis, and for instance, 2 of our growers that grew in their own greenhouse. Now we had some genetics from other places, we kind of experiment, but 2 that grew themselves and no one else had problems with males. And so there's a debate between, you know, our grower and, you know, we brought Larry Smart in from Cornell about what could have happened. Environmental factors on occasion can turn a plant to express male, right? And so, you know,
If you're overheating specifically.
especially we had, so what we trace it back to is there was like an 80-degree day followed by like a 45-degree day, right? So essentially what our Chief Agriculture Officer hypothesized that could have been one of the factors, there's always many factors to any problems with cannabis, right? Is that basically turned the plant into survival mode, and you know, the plants basically told themselves they need to express both male and female, or male, and so that they could survive and pass their genetics on to the next season, because that's the goal of any plant, is to
How
pass
long
its
were those
genetics
plants
on.
in the plug before you put them in the ground?
What's that?
How long were those plants in the plug before you put them into the ground?
3 to 4 weeks. Yep.
The ones
So,
Because I know that a lot of people have
Yeah.
been getting hermaphrodites from leaving it in the plugs like 6 weeks and
Yeah.
then transplanting.
If they're getting stressed, it's
that could be another one
possible.
of stress.
Yeah, and it really depends on the genetics.
Light stress will do it too.
Huh?
Light stress.
Light stress.
It
yeah.
will make them herm, but
Herm.
it won't make them go
Oh,
full
you're saying they
male.
were full male?
Did you have those genetically tested for actual male genes?
So we had some, so we got 250,000 plants, so we weren't able to test everything. We had a good amount tested.
But I just
Could
mean
always
ones
get
that
bait and
they
switch
showed
though.
As males, did you have them tested to see if they were actual XY? And my understanding of hermaphrodite is they can show anything from what we would perceive as a full male, and that's what all of the.
They're not gonna look, well, they're
Well,
gonna
I mean,
express both. They're gonna
Literally,
express
like
both.
Anka is technically a hermaphrodite plant. I mean, their entire, that's what that variety is they have literally isolated that hermaphrodite gene. That's why they have about 70% of their plants are female. Well, and then they of course pollinate themselves in the field, so that you end up with a higher rate of female than male for a dual purpose variety.
Mhm.
And just growing Anka the first year with Cornell, you had everything in the field that looked from a strict male all the way to a strict female. And just because you saw that it was a full male did not actually mean that the genetics lined up to show that it was definitely a, you know, an XY or XX.
Yeah,
whatever.
the thing is,
So-
for most small growers, this is we should never be getting to that point anyway, to be honest. If a lot of people are doing 1 to 5 acres and you have good feminized genetics and you have good greenhouse practices, you're gonna get about 1 male for every 4,000 plants on average. And you're gonna scout your fields and you're gonna walk those fields every couple days and you're gonna look for that 1 male if you can. And so, usually it's about 1 male per 4,000.
4,000.
Is what we've been seeing. We're getting a male every couple acres or so.
Yeah, and just for the record,
Yeah.
I grew under Kaelan. I
Yeah.
had 1 male. I think I had about 70,000.
Yeah, and that's usually the general average at 96%, 99% feminization rate. So, you know, if you're getting to the point where you're like testing your feminized seed crop for XY chromosomes, like, it's probably too late. You know, you just got to start with the right practices and be careful.
No, I guess
So-
maybe.
No, but it's a
Yeah,
good- it's a
I
good
just meant
point,
to
yeah.
verify whether
But there was a
they
lot.
were hermaphrodite
Right.
or did they sell you seed that
Sure.
was irresponsibly produced.
Well, and that's the thing, and you know, so we brought in a good amount of genetics, and so you never know when you're going to get bait and switched when you're buying genetics.
Well, I mean, our
That's
first
another
year, we
thing.
bought 70,000 seeds and 6,000 of them were actually vendors.
Yeah.
That's it.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, we had
and
another
went
issue
to
the year before. Yep.
You know, producers and
Yep.
I mean, what is it? Oregon CBD is getting a pantsuit off by several different states because there was stuff that they put, whether they produced it or not, their name was behind it.
Yeah, a lot of people.
And
So we've been using Oregon CBD genetics for the past 2 years, almost exclusively, and have had zero problems. I've been out to their facilities. I've seen all of their stuff. They're great guys. Last year, people were lying and saying they're selling Oregon CBD genetics, and they weren't. If you didn't buy it from the Crawford brothers specifically, it's not the genetics. It's not possible. The way they're breeding, they're all first-generation hybrids. So no one is taking their plants and turning them back into seed and then selling you that first generation. It's not possible, and so there's been a lot of lawsuits like that
well,
because people
Kentucky
were.
and North Carolina
Yeah, absolutely,
specifically,
because
they
people were
thought they
lying.
were buying from.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of very sketchy people in cannabis right now because it's a gold rush. So that's why.
Or if they have good intentions and they just really don't know what they're doing, or they
that.
don't want to take the time, right? So we have feminized seed production, right? We work with, there's like 6 or 7 cultivars in our breeding program. We will only offer for sale this year with 1 because it's stabilized and we know what it's going to do, and that's a berry blossom. And specifically for us is our breeding program. CBD levels are important. You know, we want to hit that 10 to 14% threshold. We look for, okay, what's going to perform and establish quickest, right? Because you never know how May and June is going to be in New York, and you know what's going to be accepting of the widest pH tolerance, right? That's really important when you talk about all the different soil types and all the different conditions on all these fields all throughout New York. It's important to have genetics that aren't finicky, right? There's a lot of genetics that only thrive in a very specific condition, right? Mostly all the genetics, a lot of these genetics came from marijuana genetics and were bred for years to express a lower amount of THC under that threshold, right? And so typically marijuana is grown in a very controlled environment, right? So then when you transfer it out into the field and you've got thousands and thousands of them, you know, you're going to identify multiple phenotypes, right? You're going to identify genetic deficiencies. I know the cherry line, if you guys grew any of the cherry wine, cherry something, if you see the plants, they don't grow that big and they have like a leaf curl on them. We've seen that across a lot of our fields, a lot of other fields that have grown cherry. So we believe it's actually micronutrient sensitivity. So it's sensitive, and so there's a lot of weird things in these genetics, and so tampering expectations is the biggest thing on everything if you're growing hemp, because it's still not settled yet, and you're going to get, like I said, some variations in the field, some variations in time that the plants are actually ready to be harvested too, and so understanding that with anything you're taking a risk, the best you can do is mitigate as many risks as possible.
Right. It's a new crop for a lot of people, and it's going to take a few years to really figure out that side and best practices, and know who the good seed companies are, and get rid of the ones that aren't the good companies. So, all right, let's go on to. So you got your plants.
Others?
Huh?
Others?
Those are.
These are actually just a greenhouse grow that we did kind of experimentally for to see if in the controlled environment we get higher quality flower. Not necessarily, actually. We got lower production in the greenhouse too.
Lower production in terms of what?
In terms of like say weight per square meter, weight per plant, etc. A lower amount of doesn't pack on flower as much. The quality was about the same as in the field. There was less instances of plants that had, bud rot on them, specifically because this is a severe haze variety. So we grew only about 2,000 of the Oregon CBD last year. And Oregon CBD is great because it packs on real dense bud, but also because of that, in the right conditions, it can rot real quickly. So we saw out in the field, we lost a good amount of plants at this specific farm. This is up in Salem, New York. We grow a lot up in Washington County. I don't know if anyone is up there, but the best soil we've ever grown is up in Washington County for sure. So we did see that more so than anything, we wanted to give this grower some experience growing in a greenhouse and in a kind of controlled environment. And just the greenhouse is open. She really just does like flowers in the spring, and then it's empty during the summer. So it's just kind of something we were experimenting with.
One of the things that we did this year with besides our field crops, we have a lot of high tunnels that we do tomatoes and peppers in, and we did like a half a high tunnel of all the different genetics we had, 10, 15 plants of each, just to see what would happen. And they did great. They got taller than the tomatoes probably. We grew them side by side. But in terms of like yields and disease pressure, we didn't really find a huge benefit to growing them under plastic versus just growing them out in the field. The only thing I would think that if you're growing under plastic and you're going to really prune those plants and manicure them and really take care of them more for the flower product, at that point there's probably something to it. But if you're growing for a biomass or mass, if you've got a lot of acres, growing them under plastic probably not worth your time unless you're going for a very specific market niche.
Or profitability.
Yeah. So
I seen on black dirt, no irrigation. They almost look like they're broadcasted, and no irrigation, no plastic. They were getting those organs or like tall.
yeah, they'll get big. You don't want to overcrowd them because then they get too tall. And this is where it comes into the next kind of portion is, all right, you've cultivated all summer long. I'm not going to really talk about cultivation because that's just a whole nother 4-hour topic. But after you're done cultivating, you have a nice crop. It's like you've called ag and markets in August, early September, whatever. They come tested them, you're safe. Now harvesting. So we harvest mostly by hand. We hand harvest the plants, we load them into trucks, we bring them into our drying facilities, which I'll talk about. The other method we did try this year is using a corn chopper, and it works. You can do a lot of acres really quickly, but the quality goes down significantly.
How much percent do you think you reduced your biomass by chopping it up like that?
Most of our chopped biomass, if you're really testing a true homogenized sample before getting rid of the stems and everything, you're probably down to about 8% is what we're seeing on average. Now,
From like 16.
From like 15, 16%. Yeah.
So you're halving it.
You're kind of halving it, but we're harvesting, 3 acres in an hour. So there's multiple drying methods, and kind of you're matching up your harvesting to your drying, but you're also matching up your harvesting and drying to your market. Because now we're starting to see a variety of qualities of biomass on the market. You've got all your stuff that's more like your Budweiser grade, and then you've got all your stuff that we're talking about, more like your craft beer, really high quality, high CBD, clean, no powdery mildew, that end. So now we're looking at a huge range of quality of crops. If you're corn chopping it, you're losing terpenes, you're losing quality. Then you also need a way to dry that material.
Silage?
We have one building that's 10,000 square feet, all netting, industrial dehumidifiers and heat. So that's like the best way to dry, right? You hang the plants 60-60, you cure them, it takes about 10 days. You pull them down, we hand buck them all. That's like your highest quality method. Then there's like the in-between methods where maybe you are hanging them in a barn with fans, no humidity control, no heat. That works in August, early September, depends on the season. It might take 2-3 weeks to dry. And then we have our third method, which is an industrial dryer. So we've got one of those huge mesh belt dryers. That thing will crank out about 200 to 300 pounds dry per hour, but the plants need to be bucked or chopped. You can't put whole plants in it. So that, because it uses huge fans and heat, that is cooking your terpenes. You're losing some minor cannabinoids. CBD is mostly still there, it's stable, but it's just a lower quality CBD that's maybe better for an isolate or something like that. It's not really what you want if you're going for a true full spectrum high terpene end product. So we're starting to see all these grades. We're starting to kind of have these differentiations. I'm sure in a few years they'll be like kind of how we're grading maple syrup or honey. We'll start having hemp extract grades. We're just not there yet. The market's not mature enough, but depending on where you want to fall in this spectrum, that's how you're choosing how to harvest and how to dry and how to treat the crop. The other method we're using is we're bucking wet in the field, or we built some buckers and we're bucking wet, and then we're putting them on racks, and we're stacking, 4x8 or the 4x6 racks. We're stacking racks to the ceiling. We have fans. We might have dehumidifiers. Heat. The issue is it's a lot of labor to do that. You're loading racks. You're stacking them. You're taking them apart.
So
Kaelan's got a good method here.
So what we did, we harvested on 160 acres, 250,000 plants in 37 days, not one day off. 61 employees we had to hire. We paid them well, like $14.50 an hour. So, we start to do that. We ran 2 shifts a day. So we ran a 1 to 9 and an 8 to 2. We paid them for an extra hour if you worked the second shift. So 8 to 3 a.m. And so basically, the reason for that is because by the time the trucks were coming in, it was really like 5, 6, 7 p.m., right? And you wanted the labor to pull them off the truck. So we rented an old Kmart in Binghamton on the north side, and it was actually absolutely perfect. We had 122,000 square feet altogether, probably about 75,000 square feet of the floor here. We brought in construction fencing to hang, and we used the existing air handling infrastructure. That is key. We did not get above 60% relative humidity over the 37 days, and it rained a good amount. So we were able to basically create a barrier between the outside and the inside. We were able to dry within 4 to 6 days. They were coming down off the fence, right? But a lot of labor. You have to get them on the fence. You got to get them off the fence. Getting good labor in New York is hard. I mean, Binghamton, we're somewhat fortunate. We have a good labor pool. We had a great group of people. And we also had people that weren't that great, and, inefficiencies there. You need to have good management. A lot of people say, why didn't you go up high, right? So we also grew in 2018, and we did go up high in 2018, right? We basically, you see a lot of people, they hang, the baling twine from the rafters, come down, basically cinched at each plant, so we're able to get like 10 plants. By the time you get that scissor lift up there with your guys, who, if you're running an OSHA, if you're running a legit facility, they need to be strapped in, they need to have helmets, they're probably getting paid more if they're going up high, right? By the time they get up there and get down, you're wasting so much time. What you're also doing is you're blocking the air circulation, right? So it's very important for us, for our guys to be able to access everything very quickly without going up high, without having to deal with those extra regulations, and then also being able to not block our air from moving. So, we wasted some space, you can maybe go up high. I mean, the problem is, going into the ceiling there wasn't necessarily an option anyways, but it's important that you think about everything in terms of efficiencies of drying, right? Where you're going to bring your material in, who is then going to hang it. You do not want your material sitting on the floor. You do not want your material sitting in big piles because they'll start to cook. Even in our trucks, right? So we had refrigerated reefer trucks. The farthest out we'd have to go about 185 miles out, Washington County on the Vermont border, and bring it back. We dropped our temperature in the box down to like 30 degrees. Got it back. It was mostly all fresh. We only really use straight trucks, right? So 26ers. The reason we did that is so I could hop in a truck. We could hire, non-CDLs, because CDLs is really, really hard to find. So we did get a CDL guy. So one of our bigger farms, we sent out a 53-foot truck. By the time we got it back, we lost a good amount of material because it started to cook, right? So it actually started to degrade in the truck, and you really, really want to avoid that because then all that hard work, some of it's for naught, that's a lower grade at that point. So you're going to go through all this effort. You want to make sure you're getting it hung as quickly as possible. If you have a lot of mold that you're bringing in from the field, right? Powdery, botrytis, bud rot. Once you hang it in a controlled environment like that, the growth is really going to stop. So, but if you put it around in the floor, that powdery can continue to spread, and that botrytis can continue to spread.
Just to clarify, when you're talking about the 53-foot truck, you're taking from the field to the drying facility.
Yep, in Binghamton, right? And Binghamton's beautiful is we got 86, 81, and 88 that all run right into Binghamton, right? But still, it's still a long drive. Think about what you packed in at 9 a.m. in the front of that truck, right? All the way to the back of that truck. By the time it's getting unloaded, my guys are getting off, and we were good, right? I mean, we were, it's 2 a.m., 1 a.m., And if it's 2 a.m., 1 a.m., and you know, we had a lot of times where our guys would stay to 5, 6 a.m. But you know, if not, you're waiting for that next shift to come in the next day to hang that. So now you're looking at almost 24 hours where your material is not hung after it's been cut, right? So now this is obviously a large scale operation if you're doing it yourself. If you're doing it in a barn or a warehouse that you can't control the atmosphere, the problem is you might have gotten it 7, 8 days. And we use like a wood moisture meter, like a little 2-prong wood moisture meter, right? So say you got down to 15%, you're almost there at 10% where you can take it down and put in a pile, forget about it until you got to shuck it. But if you have a day where it starts raining and you get 90% relative humidity, which is pretty common in New York in October, all that material is going to remoisturize. You're going to lose that past 3, 4 days of drying, and now you're adding. So you could take it 15 to 20 days to get a crop that's dry. So our big thing is we're fitting 160 acres into 1 acre. We need to have turnover, constantly turning it over, right? If you have the space where you have 2,000 square feet for every acre that you grow, and it's about 2,000 square feet or more, depending on how you set it up, you got to make sure if you need to rotate, then you need to control your atmosphere. You need to get, you know, some Quest dehumidifiers in there, which work all right. But more so than anything, you need to have really good air circulation, right? Do not try to cheap out on fans. It's really important. We rented a lot of our stuff from Duke. Duke was great. They came down, dropped the fans off, dropped the DHUs off, and we were fine. We really didn't have to use the DHUs. What we did is we had 3 heaters and 3 ACs, right? ACs are also dehumidifiers. So we would run the heat, pull the moisture out, turn the heat off, and we had set, you know, 6 zones, so we had to, you know, get kind of creative with the way the thermostats. But then we pull that moisture out for the ACs, right? So we were able to tie into that existing infrastructure. If you don't have that, then you can do like a method like that where you heat it up, pull that moisture out, and then vent out, right? So if you can pull air in on one side of your barn or wherever you're drying and pull it out on the other side, then you can use heat to kind of pull that moisture out and vent it out. But if you're pulling in 80% relative humidity air, you're not really doing yourself much good. So.
Right. And one of the things we noticed, and I don't know, I think we might have done this, is that you can hang the whole plants, or you can go through and you can kind of branch them and pull out the main stem. If you're smaller scale and you have time to pull out that main stem, and then you hang those on nets or fencing or whatever you're doing, they'll dry a lot faster. That main stem, especially on some of these feminized genetics, you know, you're talking about small maple trees. They're like this. They're holding a lot of moisture, and if it starts raining outside and you don't have heat and you don't have dehumidifiers, you're looking at 2 to 3 weeks of drying time on most of the New York State fall. So if you have the labor, you can just kind of hack them up with machetes or clippers or whatever, and then do it that way. You'll get a lot faster drying, but it's a lot of labor. You're out in the field, you're cutting up plants, you're loading pallet bins, you're putting them on trucks, you're bringing them to your drying space. So it's definitely an option, but it just really is going to depend. Every situation is going to be a little bit unique.
Well, and we're battling that the entire time. We're constantly trying to figure out what's more efficient in terms of cutting. In the field, now Colleen can tell you, I mean, we kept going back and forth, right? First you're saying branch. Problem with branches, now you've exponentially added the amount of pieces you have to hang, right? And also it's not as quick to hang, right? So the happy medium is we quartered them, right? You know, quartered them up. The bottom quarter, we honestly, if it wasn't valuable material, left that in the field. You know, don't get caught up with trying to get everything out of the field, because really the only thing that's valuable is the flower and the leaf material. So if there's like nothing, no flower or leaf material on that bottom branch, leave it. You know, come back if you can later. You don't know how long you're going to have to harvest. That's the thing. So you really want to go take your A and B harvest, come back for your C and Ds, right? When I say that, I mean like for marijuana, when you grow marijuana, you take your A harvest, take your headies, so you take your colas, right? That's your valuable flower. Maybe you're going to market that on the CBD side for a premium smokable flower. Go get that hung, right? Go get your Bs, your next level, you know, your other, you know, because cannabis matures from the top down anyway, so you're giving, the plant will continue to mature. So then you come in and you can take the rest of the plant. But you have to prioritize, and you have to, the one thing you have to do, we have an excellent team. We're a team of people that just execute, doers. We've got some great union guys on our staff. So but you gotta expect every possible thing is gonna go wrong, right? Your truck's gonna break down, your dehumidifier is gonna break down, you're gonna blow, a fuse, and the power is gonna go out, your labor's not gonna show up, it's gonna freaking rain for 2 weeks.
Sounds like farming.
Yeah. So and harvesting stuff. So your genetics might not be quite ready, but you're gonna have to make the hard decision to go out and get it, or get your tops and come back and get more.
Yeah,
Are
and
you
our,
doing
our
any
first.
fresh frozen at all?
Nope.
No fresh
Like
frozen?
just like freezing it right there.
Yeah, we do that a lot in the THC world. So we do a lot of extract. If we're doing extract, we're usually doing fresh frozen because the terpenes are through the roof, and there's a lot of other advantages too.
Do like live rosin or live resin.
Yep.
Yeah, the CBD world hasn't been able to scale the fresh frozen quite yet. If you're a small grower, that's one thing, but when you've got
Are there
hundreds of
facilities
thousands of
that
plants-
could facilitate that around here?
Possibly not in my area.
We've
but-
looked at some ice company freezers and stuff, but
Right,
it's
yeah.
a whole
My
nother.
friend would just rent a freezer
Yeah.
truck when he got a early frost and almost lost everything.
The
He
issue
just
is
chopped it all.
with that extract, what are you doing with it? Because at that point you've got THC that's pretty high, and so you can't really be selling that in the
The
open.
live resin.
Yeah, CBD market. So if you're doing that, that's great if you can sell through THC
Okay.
dispensaries or mix it back down and dilute it with another oil. But, once you start getting into selling that kind of stuff in New York with 2% THC, you're looking at a whole nother set of illegal issues.
Right.
So that's the danger, and that's why I don't think that industry is scaled yet, because the market isn't really there on the legal
Okay.
side.
Yeah, I know my friend said they were doing some of it like that out in Colorado, but.
Right. And if you're selling it
Yeah.
through legal, THC dispensaries, and
Oh yeah, well, I mean,
2%.
this was in CBD hemp in Colorado.
Right.
Is live
Right,
resin
so-
considered the process good if it's not extracted through ethanol or CO2 and it's just hot pressed? Is that
It's not allowed according to the research partner agreement.
Yeah, according to the agreement, it's technically not allowed, but that's, I'm sure, all going to change. So I think we have about 15 minutes. I can't read that little
You
clock.
made a good point about the frost, right? So a lot of our genetics, that we've seen can go through a few frosts. What your danger is frost, rain the next day. Then you're gonna start to see your bud rot, right? And if you're a small grower, you start to see bud rot, cut that out, get that out of the field, right? But the thing with bud rot is the spores are already there. It's already there. It just needs to be activated in the right climate, the right environment. So you start to see rot. I mean, I've seen people's fields go brown in a matter of 2 days. So, it's not the frost that you're worried about, it's the frost, then the rain, and it also depends on how well you're able to prepare throughout the summer. Throughout the summertime, you want to keep those bottom branches down, those bottom leaves down, because when the rain falls on the ground, it's splashing up onto that bottom part of the plant, and that's where you get a lot of your bud rot, a lot of your powdery, right? And then it can spread like wildfire through your field.
Right, and that's why we don't like to put more than 1,800 plants per acre. Keep them spread out, keep some good wind going. If you're down in a valley somewhere and you have that settling air, you might even want to go more space, because those do become serious issues.
And it depends on where you are. If you can, during the summertime, if you can prune back your plants that face, say east, right? This is what a lot of the grape growers do on the lakes, is they'll prune on the east side. So when the sun comes up, you're going to burn off a lot of that moisture. It's really important. The microclimates for cannabis are critical, right? When you're talking about quality product. And with adult use coming, you're looking at cannabis holistically, right? So you might be growing CBD now, but a lot of people are looking to grow marijuana in the future, right? And so if this is a learning experience for you, then you should take it very seriously and think about, what you need to do to grow a crop that's going to pass the muster and then go into a dispensary, right? So if that's the way you're taking it, you're growing a small crop in an acre or less, right? 500 plants, even 150, 200 plants, then you should start to build up those good practices now, because when the adult use market comes, it's going to need a lot of material, and what we try to do as an organization is tell the state that they can lean on growers, hemp growers, and growers that experience in vegetable and organic growing to supply the massive demand, right? And that's only going to be the case if we can produce a quality product similar to what Canopy Growth and what they're going to be able to do in these massive warehouses. right? So a lot of care, spending a lot of time with the plants and learning. The best thing you can do while growing hemp is to learn and write stuff down and take pictures and get as much data as possible. That data is going to be more valuable than your yield, because as you continue, if you're really serious about growing cannabis in the long term, whether that's high cannabinoid hemp or high cannabinoid on the THC side, it's really important to gain that experience now.
I got a question about compliance and multiple harvests. So how do you keep a consistent THC level with multiple harvests?
So you're talking about multiple harvests
So you're
as in
saying
like doing an
you're
autoflower?
saying you're taking your A's and your B's and your C's and your D's. So,
You're doing that within the 15 days of your last test?
So the state is what, 20?
Well, right now in New York, yeah, they're like 20 to 30 days. So we'll see. We're pushing them to keep that testing protocol for this year and not go with the 15 days. And so hopefully we're going to win that battle, because that 15 days will be a tough one to meet. But what, in terms of the different parts of the plants, like Kaelan was saying, the top is maturing first, so it's always going to have the highest CBD and THC percentage.
right. Well, what I'm saying is, as far as compliance and proving, like, so each harvest, like you're talking about preparing for cannabis. Like, I worked in the cannabis industry in California and Colorado, and like so each harvest is what you would consider a harvest batch, right? So each day that you harvest something that's treated the same, harvested the same day as the harvest batch, and has a separate test on it, right? So I'm seeing if you're doing multiple harvests,
right,
then you're going to need multiple tests for each harvest. So on the same plant, you're going to have to test it 4 times within the 3 weeks.
Ag and Markets has not caught up to that, and it's just, you just do whatever best practices and what's safe for your farm, because they're not going to come out, they're not going to be able to do that this year. They're not going to be able to come out and do all those tests for each harvest. So
I agree,
in
but
terms
I'm
of,
saying like best practices now, like we have to get used to it. You can't get into bad habits, otherwise you're
right,
getting...
it's going to be, and this
But
is,
when you have 10,000 plants out in the field, your biggest focus is getting them out.
Yeah.
So it's like, but on the THC side, you're obviously probably not going to grow 10,000 plants in the field.
No.
So, but I do see what you mean. On the compliance side, it is difficult to keep track of. Now, what you can do is you can let's say you're bringing them into a barn, let's say you're doing like construction netting, right? What you can do is you can tag that net section, right? Came in on this, that's what we did. So if you look at, it, each one of our fences had a tag that had the date and that had the farm, because we had 15 farms, right? And so sometimes we had 4 farms going in one day. So to keep track of that was really important. We actually had one employee who just quality control, and tracking. And so, you have to come in, you put that into a batch database. We've used there's some programs right now we're turning to Native Ag. Native Ag's an interesting program, also for vegetable growers. Asset Panda we use. I would not recommend Asset Panda. It's not really for the dynamic asset.
we already started using BioTrack. If you're out in the West, I'm sure you've probably been using BioTrack. So it really will just depend, from that perspective of how they're going to start inspecting and regulating, how they're going to really look for compliance. Because right now, they just don't have enough inspectors to keep up. But for any vegetable farm, if you're GAP certified or you're organic certified, the records you're keeping and the way you're doing it now is going to be good enough, especially on the GAP side, for hemp compliance at this point. Once we get into these like very specific topics, like I want to harvest these, plants 4 times in like 8 weeks, and that's where, we're going to have to really start looking at the laws and figuring out how to do this for real. But as of right now, it's just best management practices. Using GAP standards is the best, safest thing you can do.
So if you see, we actually tag, so we use color coding, and so you can see tags all the way through the entire floor, right? And so we got pretty granular too. We took every 10-foot section and tagged it. But you don't really need to do that. You really just need to keep track of each fence line. But sometimes we would have a farm stop halfway through, and then we'd have to go through. But yeah, just keeping good records and keeping track. Whether it's just using an Excel spreadsheet or not, it's important.
Kind of on the topic of compliance and whatnot. I know that in the THC industry, there's a lot of focus on your inability to use the same piece of equipment on multiple strains. and that you have to be very focused on interchangeability and like cleanability. Have you heard anything possibly coming down the pipeline that might indicate that industrial hemp would be treated in a similar way, where you needed to be very focused about the equipment you're using and not using the same equipment across strains without cleaning?
No, absolutely not. But the one thing you think about equipment is picking up heavy metals, right? Especially like cadmium. And so when you think of anything that's going to shear or trim, you be very careful about what's coming off onto the product.
We had another question.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to harvest, THC levels and stuff. Research agreements, due diligence. We have a 20-day window from the time we notify them to bring it in. Technically, you should notify them again if you exceed that. I would highly suggest if you exceed that and you create a separate lot or window, you pull your own COA. I think there's a lot of experienced growers this year. And many of us got phone calls and emails. They're not coming down the test, but we're still responsible for pulling our own tests. Hopefully you guys did back at a favorable time. So really, I mean, the answer is you should be keeping your own records. I will say from a processor's perspective, we harvested over a long window, as many people did. So we'll have varying levels of things. So as we process, say, all of our Suver Haze, we're actually choosing to make that all one lot. Even though it's dated, it's still all the one lot from 2019. And as we process through it, we select across the timeline so we can homogenize the crop. So there's multiple ways to be creative.
Right, that's a great point. And I think just your point on the testing your own crop. In other states, I don't know if anyone's been following it, there's burning hemp fields, Utah, Nevada, and they're using their state tests and saying, oh look, you went over total THC, we're burning your crop, and the farmer never had his own or her own tests done. And so they have nothing to go to court and prove that the state overreached and their testing methods were bad. And there's a margin of error, and that 0.1 shouldn't have gone to 0.4, should have stayed at 0.3. So I think like what you're saying is totally true. You know, we use a number of labs, like SC labs in California. There's a ton of them you can mail samples to. Highly recommend testing your own crop, but send them dry samples. Don't send them wet samples. Dry your crop, make sure it is how it is in storage, send it out, and keep that stuff on file. Make sure you know what field it came from. All general, record keeping stuff. That's a really good point, because just in case that starts happening in New York, as a farmer, you need to be able to argue and say, no, I was at this rate, this is when I harvested, here's my COA, your Wadsworth lab sucks. We had tests come back from the state lab that were inconclusive. Yeah. It's like, really? Inconclusive? Okay, fine. That means we passed. But like,
with that, I don't know if your samples got mailed in, and I had a long conversation with our inspector last year. They were literally mailing green samples on Fridays.
Yeah, I know.
When there's nobody in the lab on Saturday. So by the time they tested that, I'm sure that was a black pile of goo.
Right.
Come Monday, by the time they even opened the thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're going to fix that in the future. To me,
but either way, you don't want to trust the state for your own personal compliance issues, because you want to be able to prove you were in compliance and your crop is fine. And at this point, the industry is just too immature. There's not enough good standard practices in any part of this industry, whether it's the growers all the way up to the legislators. It's crazy. So you just do the best you can to keep those records, keep that testing on file.
And one thing to add, so as you're looking to grow hemp and process hemp or in the hemp industry, it's important to take a lot of to listen to a lot of people, but understand that everyone has a limitation in terms of their knowledge, right? So the guy down the road that's been growing pot for 30 years, he understands the cannabis plant. What does he really know about growing more than 50 plants? Probably not much, right? That guy from Colorado is going to charge you $5,000 consulting fee because his buddy grew hemp last year, and he has a company that's called Hemp Consulting LLC, whatever. Probably not worth the money. You can probably find the information he's going to tell you on Google, right? And also lean on your extension agents, because they're going to be able to give you a lot of information, and they share a lot of information back and forth. Talk to the community, share that information. I mean, we could monetize a lot of the information that we get from from our farms and stuff, but we just don't feel comfortable doing that. We don't feel like that's the right way to go. So don't spend a ton of money trying to gather information just so you think you can hit a home run year one. Do your own research. Grow a few different genetics. Grow it in different ways. Grow it in different fields, right? It's important to gain the knowledge and the experience yourself instead of trying to lean on other people that you might have to spend a lot of money on, and then you might end up locked in court with later down the road. So, experience is the best teacher. I think Allan would say so too. I mean, our agriculture officer has been in cannabis for 30, 35 years. We learn stuff all the time. And one thing that he taught me more than anything else is that it's never one thing. Cannabis, never one. It's always a host of factors. You can never nail a problem down to one factor, right? It's so complex. The cannabis plant is so complex, and the way it uptakes nutrients is so complex that there's, you can think you did everything right, and you still have a problem, right? And you think you could do everything right, and at the end of the year you didn't get 1,000 pounds per acre, and you're pissed. It's like, it's tough, and there's a lot of variables, and there's a lot of failures, and the only way something's a true failure is if you don't learn from it, in my opinion. So.
We've got time for a couple more questions, I think. Yeah.
Is anybody working on a field test kit?
Is anyone what?
Like working on a field test kit? Does it have to be like
for CBD or
yeah, does it have to be
THC?
super
Yeah,
orange?
There's multiple. There's Orange Photonics that has mixed reviews.
Yeah.
There's a couple companies doing field test kits, but they're $10,000 to $15,000 a unit, plus every sample costs like $7. And I don't think that's a huge. If you have a ton of strains and you're doing R&D, you're doing breeding, you're looking for genetics, that's one thing. But if you're just looking for 1 or 2 compliance tests per variety per August, September, I don't think it's probably worth the $15,000 investment in your first year or two out to do that. We send samples to our lab basically every single day. Samples like $50 for potency. I mean, it's going to take us a lot of work to make that Orange Photonics thing pay for itself, but also it's not a third party. So those test results, if I needed them for the state, they're not going to be that useful. If I'm sending that to like a 1705 accredited lab, it's legitimate, it's not just some guy in his basement with an HPLC, that is a legitimate COA with a third party, validated result. So I would, if you're just starting out, I would shy away from spending that money unless you just have tons of cash you really want to buy. Yes.
So my buddy Rob up in Michigan, big time grower, 70,000 plants, 35 acres. He had some horror stories with these guys that big hotshots, farmers, because they knew how to farm, they will build their stuff wet.
Yeah.
So they have a KFC, old buildings, cold storage, 3-phase C1D1. He said he put those, the one guy, but he put them in the freezer. I think they got it down like to 30 degrees. He said it was getting so hot and decomposing that the bottoms were just blowing up. And these bales would go like this. So I had my 2 guys from Wall Street, my investors come up, yesterday, we were looking at some farms. They mentioned baler.
A lot of people are doing wet baling. In New York, did anyone in here try wet baling their CBD crop this year? So, one did?
Well, I'm in Ontario, but that's what most of the guys are.
They're wet baling their CBD.
They're wet baling and then putting it through.
Yeah.
Dryers.
So we know people. I know people wet baling in New York, in Vermont, all over the country, and if you have the right baler, it is possible. Like a 40,000 psi baler with nitrogen, whatever. They're 200 grand. It's possible to do, but again, the quality of that crop, it's fine. There's definitely CBD oil in there at mass scale, and you're talking about 2,000-pound bales, and it's a doable way to make really cheap isolate.
It's like a dry it. It's like dry it.
Yeah, right. But you still got to dry it, which is doable, and it's just the quality. If you're looking for minor cannabinoids and terpenes, that's not what you're doing. If you have 1,000 acres and you just want to wet baler on contract per acre because you're tired of doing corn and soy, that's a whole nother story. And you have a processor who does, there's some processors out there who do 40,000 pounds a day, no problem. So it's just a whole nother market. I think New York might not be the best place for that market. Yeah.
Kind of on that same spot. Basically, you talked about one end of the spectrum with the ultra fast drying scenario, the other end of the spectrum where you're hanging it. Have you done anything with any of the tobacco barns?
A hothouse is like a hothouse, a hop dryer or something like that?
Well, it's not, I mean, it generally, I mean, we've done it now for 2 years. It takes about 36 hours. We get about, 2,400 pounds per 40-foot container back out of dry matter.
Oh, you mean the shipping containers with the false floors?
Yes.
Got it.
So we are controlling the humidity, we are controlling the heat, we are controlling the airflow.
Yeah.
Do we have some terpene loss? I'm sure we do. I mean, because we're a pretty popular place to be for all the neighbors and anybody else, downwind. But you're going to have some loss no matter how you drive.
Yeah.
We do seem to have a pretty decent terpene profile on the end of it. It's kind of a middle road, but the nice thing is even when it's, like you're saying, when it's raining,
you can control
we have the predictability of when that's going to be done.
Like how much can you said 2,400 pounds in a 36 hours stretch?
Comes out dry about, I mean, this year was a little different. Our growers, some of them did a lot better job than what we had done previously. Just the density was a lot higher. So we've bumped up now to each container to probably closer to 3,200 pounds. It does take 40 hours to dry, but when I penciled out the math, I'm not paying for any more propane.
How do you have to get the material? You have to strip it wet?
We kind of came up with our own way of, we take the center stalk out.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And then we have a kind of unique way of channeling the air so that it gets through all the material, but at the same time it's still reasonably efficient to get in and out of the container.
Yeah, and those work. I know a couple people who lined up, 20 of those things and just go for it. It's definitely doable. It's very labor intensive. If you've got a big crew, you can load it up, load it up, load it up, start unloading, totally doable. We've never tried it at our farm and never done the actual test for terpenes and all that stuff. So, but I think, that's like a middle ground road of you don't want to use a corn chopper, you don't want a wet bale, but you don't want to hang dry everything in climate controlled environment. So again, I think one of these days, in the next year or two, when the market understands these differences, every method will have its place in price. And at that point, that's where people can start differentiating what they're doing. But yeah, those do work pretty well. Do you know what one of those units costs if you're going to buy them brand new?
We got ours out of North Carolina.
Okay.
I want to say that it was 30,000.
Yeah, and that's not bad to run, a few thousand pounds every few days. So, awesome. Is there any other questions? We might have a few minutes left. I don't know.
Just a comment. I think with the inspectors coming out and so forth, but if they come to your spot and your record is up to snuff and you're meticulous with that and everything's on the snuff, I think they're not going to bother you as much and they can trust you. Just like a home inspector coming out or a builder, they know you're doing the right thing and they don't have to babysit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Pretty cool.
The inspectors have been good. They've, I know that they've been out to farms and there's a couple acres and they come out there and they go, all right, we got to sample each variety because you've got 5 varieties listed here and you have them on 2 acres and we got to test them all. And they're like, all right, which variety is which? And well, I don't know. Well, when did you plant that or and that? I don't know. When are you harvesting? And so when you get into those issues with no records, that's when the inspectors start getting really nervous because they don't know what they're testing. And they could be they don't know what they're looking for, no records. So, and that happens kind of a lot. And that's not good for the industry because then when the inspectors get nervous, that spreads to all of the people who are doing it right.
Don't forget to flag the ones you test.
Yeah. So, I mean, when our inspector
or test the same.
When our inspector comes out, we follow him around, and we don't do this in any sort of like negative manner, and he doesn't take any offense. But someone goes with him, and every 2-inch cola that he cuts, we cut the same plant. We keep it on file. We dry it, keep it on file. So if there's an issue, it's like you cut these plants, and we cut the same exact ones with you, and he knows we did it. So then, at the end of the year, if there's ever an issue, Sour Space Candy, field 2, rows, 10 to 20, here's the samples. Like, if you think they came out hot, we don't. We cut the same ones. And so, that's never happened, thank God, especially because we're still in Delta 9 mode. But just in case, it's very time consuming, but that's really that's one of the ways you've got to kind of protect yourself and think ahead.
You don't have to test every sample you take. You can try it.
Yeah, we don't test them. We put them in paper bags, we mark them, and we just stick them in the closet. We dry them, we stick them in the closet, and if there's ever an issue, oh, remember this date when Tom came out and we took these samples? Like, this is it. This is the same stuff. And the inspector, he would know. Yeah.
Are you guys doing any experimental drying methods, like vacuum, microwave, type of stuff like
No,
that?
I've heard some mixed reviews on the microwave drying. But yeah, we did some testing on a fluid bed and also a rotary dryer. A lot of promise with the rotary dryers. They're just really expensive.
The Munters?
What's that?
The Munters with the desiccation wheel?
Yeah. So they use them mostly to dry like alfalfa, corn ethanol, stuff like that. So the rotary dryers are great. They're probably the most efficient way to dry at scale, in our opinion. The problem is size. So when you dry anything, the size reduction is the problem. The fluid bed dryer didn't do that well. And we actually developed some of our own machinery to try to size the material down so that it can go through the rotary dryer, and we had some success with that machine. But I think rotary drying technology is probably the most promising in terms of large-scale mechanization. It's just like, I mean, I saw the amount of propane that Allan was using, and my buddy Eric Carbone, who did the
Belt dryers.
The belt dryers, I mean, it uses so much energy, and beyond the fact that, you know, I mean, I know personally that we're in hemp to create a more sustainable crop, and so you kind of throw all that away if you're just using like massive amounts.
Oh man, we filled a 1,000-gallon propane tank 2 times a day using that.
Yep.
Wow. It's no joke.
Yeah.
So I think we're pretty much coming to a close tomorrow. I just want to remind people, the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association, we kind of have an open policy meeting at 4:30 where there'll be mostly an open question and answer meeting, so that as an association, one, we want to sign up a lot of new members. It's kind of power numbers in this game. And two, we want to know what people want us to focus on for the upcoming year, whether it's testing or adult use, whatever it is. So we want to kind of hear some feedback of people and where they are, where they see the gaps, where they've struggled. So we spend a lot of time meeting with our legislators and ag and markets, the governor's office. So, and they've been mostly receptive to all of our suggestions, like the Delta 9 thing. We got to keep that this year. They almost went to total THCA in July. And thank God
And screwed everyone.
And screwed everyone. And luckily, you know, we were able to kind of prevent that from happening. So there's a lot of those issues that
Got the hemp extract bill passed.
We got the hemp extract bill passed.
Which we helped write.
Yeah. So if you guys are around tomorrow at 4:30, hopefully they gave us a bigger room than this one. We'll have our board members there, and then we'll have an hour to kind of talk and brainstorm of the future of the industry. If you're not around, we do have a website. It's nycgpa.org. There's some surveys on there. You can sign up for membership on there. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. And we also have a table in the trade show section. So if you want to stop by and chat this weekend, we will also be around. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.